All right, buongiorno, good morning, top of the day, however you want to take it from a rainy Queens, New York City. It's your boy Big Rich, and welcome to our first mob spotlight. First of many. First of many. So, first of all, salute to Vic Vega on the banner. It's popping. And of course, the co producer, Shattered, salute to you, sir. Is the one that's going to line up all the reports that come out. You understand what I'm saying? They're like, Rich, where do you get your information from? I get it from Shattered. Where does Shattered get his information from? None of your business. That's where he gets his information from, all right? All right, anyway, crazy morning. My apologies. No morning show. When I mean crazy fucking morning, crazy morning. Just sometimes when it rains, it pours, eh? Huh? All right. So, welcome to our first mob spotlight, where we spotlight certain individuals, unique individuals that have made a name for themselves in the world of the mafia. And our first spotlight will be on this man right here, Anthony Fat Tony Salerno. Okay, let's go. Our first mobster spotlight. Anthony Fat Tony Salerno was the epitome of a perfect mobster. He spent his entire life hustling and controlling the streets of East Harlem. His name arose in numerous investigations, but he avoided any major convictions until he was 75 years old. Sticking to the code of avoiding drug sales, he dodged a heroin bullet that brought down so many of his peers over the years. Steeped in the earliest traditions of the mafia in the New World, he stuck to his oaths and did what he was told. His ultimate allegiance to La Cosa Nostra was shown when he was sentenced to 100 years in the infamous Mafia Commission trial that included the bosses of all five New York families, despite the fact that he wasn't even the real boss of the Genovese. Born 1911 and raised in East Harlem, New York, which was the territory of the 116th Street Mob, possibly the original Cosa Nostra group in the United States. As a teenager, Salerno worked for the Lucky Luciano family in gambling, numbers, loan sharking, and protection rackets. As a made man, he of course must have performed and known of numerous murders, but he was never charged with homicide. When the Luciano family became the Genovese family, Salerno was assigned to the 116th Street crew headed by Michael Trigger Mike Coppola. In 1948, Coppola fled to Florida to dodge murder charges. He said, I'm out of here. Fat Tony Salerno became the new capo. For the next 40 years, Salerno climbed the family ranks by and controlling the lucrative Harlem numbers racket on behalf of the Genovese family. Salerno was never seriously linked to drug distribution, smart, focusing instead on gambling, loan sharking, and union corruption. See, it's rare when you hear stories, but there's many out there of men of honor that actually stuck to the code and didn't fuck with drugs. Didn't fuck with drugs, right? In 1959, Salerno was a secret financial backer of the heavyweight title fight at Yankee Stadium between Swedish boxer Ingmar the Great White Hope Johansson and Floyd Patterson, which ended in a shocking upset when 4-1 underdog Johansson knocked out Patterson and took his championship belt. The fight generated over $1 million in closed circuit television fees, making it the most profitable boxing match in history up to that point. Rumors of Salerno's involvement caused a stir, but ultimately no charges were filed against Fat Tony for his involvement. By the 1960s, Salerno controlled the largest numbers racket operations in New York, grossing an estimated $50 million a year. This is in the 60s. Thank you. 50 million. As East Harlem became a totally black and Puerto Rican neighborhood, salute to the Boricuas, most of the old time mafiosi moved out. But Fat Tony held on, keeping his headquarters at the Palmer Boys Social Club on 116th Street. The Palmer Boys was basically a room 18 feet wide and 55 feet long, occupying the bottom floor of a four-story tenement building in the most desolate but once thriving East Harlem Italian American community. The building had a long history with the family. Back in the 1930s, it had served as the headquarters of Trigger Mike Coppola. Over continuous cups of espresso, the day's business would be conducted. He claimed jokingly the Palmer Boys was a pleasant place to be because all he had to do was sit there while people brought in money. And did they bring him money? He repeatedly kept more than 1 million in small bills packed in shoe boxes and stacked from the floor to the ceiling in a closet in his apartment. $1 million. Salerno had three main lieutenants: Louis the Gimp Avitable, Salvatore Apuzzo, and Louis Vigilante. Numerous independent gambling operators paid Tony and the Genovese to operate in Harlem. The Shitter brothers, Sam and Moish, for example, kicked out a large cut of the profits from their $30 million a year Harlem Numbers Bank. Salerno also set himself up as a high-level deal maker and intermediary for mafiosi from around the country, brokering deals and settling disputes. Salerno preferred a low-key existence, smart, and was never seen in high-profile mafia haunts. To cement his no-nonsense image, he sent out Christmas cards with a picture of himself in pajamas and a backwards baseball cap. That's funny. Salerno divided his time between a home in Miami Beach, Florida, a 100-acre estate and horse farm in upstate Rhinebeck, New York, and an apartment in the upscale Gramercy Park section of Manhattan. He was famous for leaving the city every Thursday night and spending the weekend out of town. The FBI accusing him of running a bookie and loan shark network that grossed $1 million annually in April 20 of 1978, and he got 6 months in federal prison for illegal gambling and tax evasion. In early 1981, after his release from prison, Salerno suffered a mild stroke and retreated to his rural estate to recover. At the time, Salerno was the Genovese family underboss. The Genovese family, considered by many experts to have consistently been the most sophisticated of the New York mafia groups, began using an elaborate scheme involving a so-called front boss to deflect law enforcement investigations. After the death of boss Vito Genovese in 1969, Frank Thierry was set up as the first front boss to protect the true godfather, Philip Benny Squint Lombardo. I love the nicknames, man. Come on. It's so dope. When Gigante took over the family upon Lombardo's retirement in 1981, Salerno was made front boss. An FBI microphone hidden in the ceiling of the Palmer Boys Social Club picked up a conversation about the Bonanno family being represented on the Mafia Commission. Fat Tony wanted the Bonannos out because of their heavy reliance on heroin dealing. On February 25th, 1985, Salerno and 8 other New York bosses were indicted in the Mafia Commission trial, the most important criminal prosecution of organized crime in United States history. The trial started in September of 1986 and lasted 3 months. In October of 1986, Fortune magazine named the 75-year-old Salerno as America's wealthiest and most powerful gangster. Many observers disputed Salerno's top ranking, claiming that law enforcement exaggerated Salerno's importance merely as an offense tactic for the commission trial. Fucking feds are filthy, dirty fucking rats. All of them. All of them. If you're a fed and you're dirty, you must come from a family of fucking rats. You play fucking dirty. You break the law and you write the law at the same time, and then you go looking to lock up other people when your hands are fucking filthy. Salerno's bail request was denied, and his attorneys appealed the decision all the way to Supreme Court. However, in United States versus Salerno, the Supreme Court ruled that he could be held without bail because of his potential danger to the community. One of the primary witnesses in the commission trial was that of Vincent Cafaro. When Vincent the Fish was a young wannabe gangster, he was busted for possessing 2 ounces of heroin. His family called on mafia member Anthony Fat Tony Salerno for help. So here's what this kid said. Fat Tony took me aside and gave me some advice. He said, "Leave the junk alone. If you need money, go out and steal." I was never asked to carry out a hit. I never had to kill anyone. That's because Fat Tony always looked out for me. It was like a father-son relationship, Cafaro said. Cafaro, before being indicted and turning into a rat for the FBI, was Salerno's right-hand man running part of the numbers business for him in Harlem. "I had some bad years, but in a good year I could make as much as 2 million or more," said Cafaro. "Whatever money I took, I split 50-50 with Fat Tony. Later, I expanded my business for numbers into sporting betting." Disgracia. On November 19, 1986, Salerno was convicted on RICO charges. The following January, he was sentenced along with 6 co-defendants to 100 years in prison. While awaiting the Mafia Commission trial, Salerno was indicted on March 21, 1986 in a second federal racketeering indictment. Among other charges, Salerno was accused of illegally helping Roy Lee Williams to win the national presidency of the Teamsters Union. Salerno was convicted in 1988 and sentenced to 70 years in prison. After his conviction and imprisonment, Salerno's health rapidly declined. In July of 1992, he died of a stroke at the Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. On a wiretap at a mob hangout, federal agents once recorded Salerno bemoaning a disrespectful young gangster who had called him Fat Tony to his face. Quote, "If it wasn't for me, there would be no mob left," Salerno said. "I made all the guys." Not long after being sentenced to 100 years in prison, Fat Tony penned this letter to a journalist. "I am familiar with the foibles of RICO. It is a congressional enactment that is a prime example of the seldom used term juxtaposition incongruity. It is a plaything for the frustrated drama actors, such as U.S. Attorney Rudy Giuliani and his stand-in assistant Chertoff. For actors they are, the jury the box, the audience for their courtroom histrionics. For what else can it be called when a 76-year-old man who has never been convicted of anything but a tax violation is portrayed as a murderer and worse receives a 100-year term for RICO extortion? What is a 100-year sentence to a 76-year-old man? A death sentence, even though the Constitution of this country allegedly forbids such a sentence for a non capital offense. When this government has, under the guise of RICO, placed all the bad guys of Italian extraction in prison, who will be next? History repeatedly shows us that the government that relies on unprincipled abuses of authority and dubious laws have a tendency to snowball into worse scenarios. The same jurors who most shamefully allow these RICO convictions may one day find themselves at the defendant's table for nothing more sinister than belonging to the Palmer Boys Social Club or the White Plains Civic Ladies Sewing Club. Sincerely, Anthony Salerno. Salute to Shattered. Great pick. Our first mob spotlight, Anthony Fat Tony Salerno. Salute.